Welcome to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast with your host, wealth coach Wade Reed.
Hey, what is up, Money Masters? It's Wade Reed here, coming back for another episode of the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. And today I just have to share something really important that's on my mind and on my heart, and that is that we are in economic turmoil in our economy right now. It's pretty bad. A lot of people are concerned about the deflation of the dollar. Our purchasing power is being deflated. The dollar could go away. You know, it's kind of a scary time for a lot of us. We're thinking about this stuff. The news isn't helping in any way, but here's the deal. When you're prepared, you don't need to fear. So let's talk about preparations today. When it comes to financial discipline, financial principles, one of the principles of successful financial management and being a money master is to have appropriate amounts of preparation. So again, back to the economy for just a second. I have to share a quick joke with you. Ronald Reagan is quoted as saying during his time as president, perhaps it was during his attempt to get the presidency again, he said this: a recession is when your neighbor loses his job, but a depression is when you lose your job. So it was so brilliant, because then he turned it into the other, the next step was, you know, when the presidential candidate at the time, Jimmy Carter, he said a recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his job. So excuse the political humor here for a second here, but I just think it's real. Like, the perception we have on life can be so interesting. When it's happening to other people, so be it. You know, my life's fine. I'm doing well. Financially, I'm doing great. You know, I've got a beautiful life. But then we're looking at our neighbors and going, oh, woe is them. You know, too bad for them. What a rough time for them. But the reality is, we often think we are never going to be the ones to have the difficulty. And that's what I want you guys to be paying attention to, is this is not true. It is just absolutely not true that it will never happen to you, because it will. And being in the financial services industry for the past 20 years and working with well over 1,000 clients at this point, I have seen the times when this does happen. And in just a recent podcast, actually, I shared a quick story with you guys about this. And I'm going to get into some other similar stories. I want to share a lot of examples of how preparations are so helpful to our happiness and to our sense of financial freedom. All right, so I want to share with you what I call a financial framework. And this is a framework that I received from a colleague in the industry. His name is Vince Dodona. He's had over 40 years in the financial services industry. He's actually in something known as the Estate Planning Hall of Fame, because that's his specialty, is estate planning strategies. He's not an attorney, but he is a financial services expert, a wealth strategist like myself, who happens to specialize in business succession planning, using last wills and testament, trusts, and various versions of that to create specialized planning for higher net worth individuals. I got to know this guy because he's been so long in the industry. He teaches me and my colleagues periodically about successful communications with clients and ways of being ourselves, so that we can be an advocate for our clients and help them have greater success in life, greater confidence with their financial lives. So this framework he calls the parallel financial paths. And literally everyone I work with, myself included, are on these two parallel paths. And so you can imagine those paths are like the rails of a train track, okay? So these are parallel paths. One of those paths is the path of protection. And protection is things from liability, disability, and early death. Those are the three main things we're protecting against. And how we do that is based on the type of protection we get, the amount of that protection, and the positioning of that protection within our overall wealth plan. So that's the protection path. This other path I'm going to just mention but not really get into. The wealth accumulation path is the second path. Wealth accumulation is about the things that we need for short-term situations, such as an emergency, you know, going to the hospital. We might need to replace tires on a car. We might need to replace a water heater in a house, an HVAC system. We might need to replace our yard due to damage or whatever it is. There's all kinds of things that come up for short-term needs. And then the longer-term stuff like retirement planning. You know, if you want to be able to retire, if you want to have the choice to not have to work, you've got to set aside and accumulate some wealth. Purchasing of assets, buying of, turning savings into investments that are sound and successful. And so if you can imagine with me this exponential growth curve, sometimes called the hockey stick curve. So just imagine a hockey stick. It's pretty flat for most of the stick, and then it has this sharp curve at the end. Growth and the compounding of our money and our assets happens a lot like that. It's a slow build over time, and then as those assets build, they start to build upon themselves. We call that compounding. The earnings or the value increase then increases again the next year by 4%, 5%, 6%, and then again, and then again, and then again. So we have a bigger and bigger volume of money that's accumulating at a similar modest growth rate, but then the volume of that earning that next year is bigger and bigger. So we have this exponential growth. That's the wealth accumulation path, is so that we can have some opportunity to have growth. Well, most of my clients that I've come across over the years have been stuck in that mindset that I only ever need to accumulate wealth and often overlook the value of protection. So I want to give you one more kind of visual representation of this. Imagine the car that you drive. So there are parallel paths on a freeway as well, right? There's a line that delineates the hard right edge. It's a solid white line. Then there's these dotted lines that indicate lanes. Then there's usually a solid yellow line on the left-hand side, so you know where you are within those paths, and you know the rules associated with that. Well, just imagine the car you drive on a freeway. In Utah, our speed on our main freeway, Interstate 15, that goes through Salt Lake City and runs north-south in the state, is mostly 70 miles per hour. And yet there are people who go 80 plus miles per hour sometimes. And when we get into the more rural areas, it actually is 80 miles per hour when we're traveling from Salt Lake down to southern Utah, for example, where the canyons are. So what gives us confidence to go at such speeds in a vehicle that literally can be quite dangerous? People die all the time in car accidents. Unfortunately, this is the case. So what do car manufacturers do? What did the laws do back in the 80s? When I was a kid, seatbelt laws were no such thing. We would lay down in the car. We would have babies in mom's laps. We would have station wagons with beds in the back. And we would just loaf around in these long road trips, for example, that we were taking. And then people started dying. You know, the rigidity of vehicles was recognized to be too strong. So instead of the impact being taken by the vehicle, it was taken by the physical body of the people inside, and people were getting really injured and dying. So how do we fix that? Well, let's make crumple zones in vehicles. Let's put seat belts in place that not just have not just a lap belt, but a cross chest strap as well. And then when I was a kid, it was just the lap belt, and then the back seats and the middle seat in particular started to have a chest strap as well. These things became law because we found that it was sorry, not necessarily law, but they became a common theme within vehicles because they were so important to the safety of the humans who were driving the vehicles. So what else is really important besides the safety system of seatbelts? Well, how about the braking system? So that really there's two main systems in a vehicle. There's the driving system of the engine and the drivetrain that gets the vehicle moving, and then there's the braking system that produces the stopping force and allows us to slow down or completely stop if necessary and when necessary. And I would ask you this question: which is more important? Is the engine more important? Are the brakes more important? And when I ask that of clients, I get the comment all the time, well, the engine's more important. Well, how come? Well, the engine is what makes the car go. It's what gets you from point A to point B. I said, absolutely. And then they go, well, I guess the brakes, if I'm going but I can't stop, I guess the engine isn't very useful. So maybe the brakes are more important. So if we have brakes, but then there's like this, it's really a paradox. One is not really better than the other. They're parallel systems in the vehicle that make it a successful transportation tool for us as drivers. So in just the same way that we need both brakes and an engine in a vehicle for it to perform its proper function, which is to get us from point A to point B safely and speedily, in finance, in our personal finances, we have the protection path and the wealth accumulation path. The protection path is like the brakes. The wealth accumulation path is like the engine in the vehicle. And I would suggest to you this: the brakes or the protection aspects are what give us confidence to use, in the case of the vehicle, the engine to its full capacity, to hit the accelerator, to go up to the 70, 80 miles per hour. And some of us like I'm a I'm a race car driver at heart. If I have a straightaway and there's nobody around on a rural road, I'm going to hit 100 to 140 miles an hour sometimes. Okay. I only will do that because I know that the braking system is working. So in our financial lives, why do we overlook this stuff, guys? Why do we overlook the value of protections? Why have we lost sight of the role of the brakes in our financial lives? Is it because of the cost, that there's an insurance premium we have to pay for? Is it because it's forced upon us? You know, the state requires auto insurance, and if you have a house, the mortgager requires that you have homeowners insurance. Is it because it feels forced upon us? Is it because people have said it's a necessary evil and we don't like things that are necessary or evil in our lives? We prefer to have choice and freedom. Perhaps it's because we just misunderstand that these risks are real because we haven't seen it happen to other people. Maybe we have so many good protections in place already that we just don't recognize the risks still exist. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I have some hunches based on my experience, and that is that we largely are so much in the consumer mindset that we don't see value in protecting. In fact, the consumer mindset includes the immense amount of money, the billions of dollars, telling us that we should be invested in the wealth accumulation path always, that cash is wasteful, that it's not keeping up with inflation, and so we can't use protection vehicles like having cash in the bank. And I refute that, actually. Being invested always is a bad idea because it's like using an engine with no braking system. So we've got to overcome this mindset that protection is bad or it's too costly. Now, protection actually is a means for those of us who have a producer mindset. And what I mean by producer is someone who's willing to produce more in society than they take from it. We're willing to, within our work environment, whether we're W-2 or whether we are business owners, that we produce value, we solve problems, we create value, we do things that are of greater value than the effort we're putting in, and that our employer or our customers are willing to pay us in exchange for that. We're exchanging our goods and services with their goods and services, and we create what we call unequal exchange because we're both getting something we perceive as more valuable than what we currently are able to do. That's the only reason exchange ever happens, is if it's unequal. And that, in other words, is fair. But I want you to think more than just fair exchange, where you both get something you value, but think about abundance exchange. This is a success law that I've learned recently from some important people in my life. The success law of abundance exchange. And when we think beyond that, we'll recognize, okay, I want to do more than is required of me. I want to give a little bit more than just fair exchange. And ultimately, we want to have that sort of abundant mindset when it comes to protection as well. Why do we protect? Because it's the right thing to do. If you are married and you're a breadwinner for your family, whether you're the man or the woman and you're breadwinning, you're supporting the family, you have a responsibility to make sure that your ability to create an income, which is your most valuable asset, is covered. And how do we do that? Life insurance. How do we do that? Disability insurance. How do we do that? Medical insurance. These are all what we call human life value protectors. And these protection vehicles, although they have a premium, what it does for us is frees up our mental space so we can focus on productivity. When we're willing to pay the premium for these insurances, it covers the catastrophic things, the thing of early death, the thing of being too sick or injured to be able to work, or the thing where an accident causes you not to be able to work temporarily, but not so long that it's disabling beyond 90 days or more. Okay? These things provide for us a certainty, and it's that certainty that allows for us to be productive at home as parents, as good friends and partners in a marital relationship or a committed relationship, as colleagues in your work environment, as leaders of businesses and organizations. When we have the proper protections, we can be better leaders. Okay, so what do I really mean? So insurances is one type of protection. We should have appropriate insurances and should be willing to pay for that because it frees up thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that is able to be used for productive activities instead of storing it up and and in cash reserves that can't be used to invest because it's needed to replace a house or a physical injury to somebody, the premium frees up all those thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars so that we can be productive with it. So we transfer the risk to a different entity. So that's one type, insurance. What about just reserves, cash reserves? Cash reserves gives us the freedom to choose to move from one job to another if we don't like the environment that we're in. Cash reserves gives us the opportunity, like the client example I shared with you guys in my prior podcast, where for most of the past 5 years, it's only been an upward trajectory of success in the business. And then suddenly this past 2 quarters, the environment changed in his business. And because I had instructed him to have some reserves on hand and to change the methodology with which he was handling his day-to-day financial transactions, there were cash reserves available to deal with this instead of having to go to his business line of credit and having an additional cost called interest. Now, that line of credit is still part of his backup, but we had cash first to deal with this, and it created a major ease of stress. Didn't relieve all the stress, but it was an easing of the stress because there was a cash availability. Another client of mine, at the beginning of COVID, we had just started working in late 2019 and now in the spring of 2020. Wade, he says, if I didn't have these principles you've been teaching me, I would have been freaking out about how to manage my business right now. But instead, I feel at ease. I feel at peace. I know I'm going to be able to get through this because I have a good system in place and I have cash reserves to work with. So cash is a major, major important part of our reserve system and our financial peace of mind. Okay, how about physical reserves? This is perhaps the most overlooked. Having some food on hand, having some water on hand, and even where necessary, fuel on hand. So food supply. There are many companies out there that offer freeze-dried foods that are kind of prepackaged into 1 month, 3 month, and even year supply that you can acquire for a few hundred to a few $1,000s, depending on what your needs are. I personally have a 3 month reserve as it stands right now for a family of 8, mostly freeze-dried foods. That allows for me to have my own personal safety net in case the grocery stores are having difficulty. I can turn to my own food supply. I also have a 250-gallon water tank in my garage that holds fresh water. And it stands vertically and it's got a spigot at the bottom, and I clean that out every couple of years to make sure that it's in good standing. So I have a water supply. And then I also have fuel supply. My fuel is a solar powered, not roof, but it's on my roof. I have solar panels that power my house during uh, sunny days, and I have a battery backup system. So maybe we'll actually store up extra energy fuel. I have some propane tanks and a barbecue in case my natural gas lines to my house go out and I can't use my oven. My electricity goes out, so I can't use my microwave. Um, I've got some physical wood on hand that I can build a fire in my backyard if I need to. I've got a bit of land where I've got some empty space where I could do that if I need to. I don't personally have this, but some people I know have guns and ammo as a reserve so they can go out and hunt for food. I have people who suggested to me in the past, I own a bunny, I want to have a honey hive. I want to have some bees so that I can have something sweet to exchange with people, because that's one of the things that we love as humans is something sweet. And he wanted to have something to exchange with other people in the form of uh, honey. So there's all kinds of ways we can reserve physical supplies as well. And invite you guys to do that, to get serious about some of your own personal reserves, your cash reserves, your physical reserves, some emotional resiliency. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know what your neighbors have as supplies. Build some friendship and camaraderie in the neighborhood so that you guys know who has what. And my neighborhood's really good about this. For whatever reason in Utah, we're really good about looking at each other's circumstances, being really helpful as neighbors. And we actually have a list, what we call block captains in our community, where we have a list of who has what. And so if something difficult happens in our community, we have power outages that are significant or a major storm or something, we can call upon that list and say, hey, we need a chainsaw. Hey, we need somebody with a truck. Hey, we need somebody with a certain skill like electrical skills or whatever it is, and we can help get things improved and very quickly in the neighborhood. So getting to know your neighbors and what they have to offer, what you have to offer, building that camaraderie is a major safety net for you in the community, so you don't have to lean on governmental support. having an inventory of your home. Take a video inventory in case you have major damage to your house. This is a form of protection. And what it does is it speeds up the transaction with your insurance company. So if you have a claim on your home because you have major damage, and there's lots of other people who've had similar damage, if you have a video inventory of what was in your house, you can easily make the list of what needs to be replaced, and it can be quantified, and then the insurance company can write you a check much faster than your peers, and you can move on in life faster. So a video inventory of your house takes 5 to 15 minutes to get your cell phone out, walk around your house, talk about what is in each room. Don't worry about how clean or messy it is, because the point isn't to showcase your house, but to just identify what you had in case of fire, flood, or some other natural disaster. All right, so I think we're getting a little bit long on this, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Just the concept of protection. We need to have mental protection in the form of abundance thinking, good, healthy relationships. We need to have physical reserves on hand. We need to have cash reserves, and we need to have easily accessible funds so that we can deal with crisis. We want to avoid debt. Consumer debt, that is, particularly asset-backed debt, is something we almost all need and can't do without, like backing up our homes, our vehicles, business debt. But the consumer debt, we got to focus on getting rid of that. And once we have some reserves in place, we can have the cash freedom and mental freedom to focus on freeing up cash flow by paying off consumer debts and then never get back into it. That's a form of protection as well, as not having consumer debts that are constantly nagging at you, that require payments all the time, and that cause kind of mental frustration. So guys, I believe deeply in who you are, in the human spirit, in resiliency. I want for you guys to be money masters. I want for you to feel really confident with money. I want you to have a sense of fun and ease when it comes to money. So I'm trying to get these principles across to inspire you to take some sort of action. So my invitation to you is to start to look at how you're handling money. And if you need to, grab my spending tracker and planner so you can get a sense of how your day-to-day spending is going. You can identify some ability to save some money and set it aside for these unforeseen circumstances. Perhaps you're over depositing money into 401k or IRA accounts that's creating illiquidity and deferring tax into the future, and maybe you're putting at risk in the stock market, and instead you should be putting that aside so that you have cash reserves so you can get some of these physical things in place. And once you have that foundation, you can go back to an investment strategy on the wealth accumulation path. I want you to know it's okay to stop those contributions for a period of time. It is perfectly okay, in fact, often necessary in order to get your financial life in its proper order and then reposition yourself for greater success moving forward. All right, guys, love you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Please share this with other people. If you haven't done so yet, jump on Apple, do a review, iTunes review for me so this can be shared with more people. If you're finding this valuable, please share the word, pass it on to your friends, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. We hope the insights from today's episode help you streamline your finances and grow your wealth stress-free. For show notes from today's episode and more tips on creating a comprehensive wealth-building plan, visit moneymasterycoaching.com. Remember, financial freedom is attainable. Until next time, keep accelerating towards your goals. See you on the next episode.